So as some of you might, thank you. Some of you might know I'm a lawyer. I don't want to bore you with the law, but on the other hand, it's also important for us to know our basic rights. And it's also important to know that as part of our basic rights, there are procedures that governments have to follow, procedures to show accountability. And I would like to speak to you a few minutes about this, about accountability and about legal rights and also legal responsibilities of the government and liabilities. Okay? Now, some of you might remember that in the spring of last year, we had, after a group of us had written to the Prime Minister expressing our concerns that the vaccines that would eventually be produced might become obligatory, either directly or indirectly, through what we call coercion, which is illegal coercion. We didn't get a reply, but we got a reply in public, because the Prime Minister went public and he said the vaccines will not be mandatory. This was in the spring of last year. So, using this forum to address the Prime Minister himself, what has changed? Why did you promise us that the vaccines would not be obligatory? And now we have been seeing that people have been forced, in many ways, I don't need to give you the details, you all know how people are being forced, directly, indirectly, if they maybe have fears, worries, doubts, or maybe they want to use other methods. What has changed? Another question I would ask our Prime Minister is, are you not aware, is your government not aware, that the Council of Europe, which is set up in order to protect people's citizens' rights, issued a resolution 2361 of 2021, and I will read you what this resolution says. Amongst other things, it calls upon the member states, Malta is a member state of the Council of Europe, not the European Union, the Council of Europe, to ensure that citizens are informed that the vaccination is not mandatory and that no one is under political, social or other pressure to be vaccinated if they do not wish to do so. So, before people might start trying to label us and media label us, you know, the people as a human race, we like to label, unfortunately, and with all due respect to people who were governing us many, many years ago, when Malta was a colony, we Maltese were called wogs, you know. Today we see it as politically incorrect, of course, you know, to call people names, to label them, to brand them. Branding is an interesting name. Branding is a marketing tool, yes? You brand your product, but you can also brand your competitor's product, yes? I have the best product in the world, you have the worst, you have a rubbish product. It's branding. So when you brand people, it's a form of putting them down. It's actually a form of hate speech. If the media or anyone else comes and says, we're anti-vaxxers, if we ask questions about the safety or otherwise of vaccines, or if we ask questions about whether we have a right to choose ourselves what to take, then we are just branded anti-vaxxers, like the Maltese were branded wogs 50, 60 years ago. This is not acceptable. Because if we ask questions, we expect answers. We don't expect to be branded and labeled, because we know that is wrong. It is not politically correct, and it constitutes hate speech, because as the speaker before me said, you don't want to have people who are divided. We don't want to have a division between the so-called vaccinated and unvaccinated, between the pro-vax and the anti-vax. That is ridiculous. We are talking about debates here. Again, while we're on to the Prime Minister, I'm mentioning Prime Minister because quite honestly, we've addressed so many things to the Ministry of Health, you know, Fern and Co, and nothing ever comes back. With all due respect, there's a lot of arrogance. Leave it up to the experts, they say. Leave it up to the experts. We are the experts, we know best. So what about the 55,000 doctors and medical scientists who signed the Great Barrington Declaration, who said this is premature to introduce vaccines, focus on national immunity. And you had hundreds of very prominent medical scientists and doctors challenging the European Medicines Agency for allowing, giving the go-ahead to vaccinate the children. Okay, there are hundreds of medical scientists who have written about this. Are these not experts as well? Do we not know that even within science there is a debate? What is this? You know, Minister Fern has once, when we had issued a judicial protest a year ago, the reply was, oh, this is all superstition, what you're saying. This is not science, this is not science. We're still waiting for the science a year later. Okay? So, really, what is superstition at the end of the day? If you are not coming up with the science. Now we've been told that there are new mask regulations, yet again. So what is this telling us? So, first, Fern told us last May, 25th of May, issued a press release, a statement saying Malta has reached herd immunity. Herd immunity, 25th of May 2001. What happened? What happened? So more and more people have been vaccinated. Okay, that's fine, it's their choice, if they want to. Unless they're being forced to, because they have to go abroad and so on and so forth. Coercion. So why are we wearing masks? You know, in life you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't tell people, my policies are successful, listen to me, I know best. And then a few months later you say, no, you have to continue wearing masks. So the question is, I'm not an expert in vaccines, in medicine, that's not my field, I'm not going to comment on that. But I'm trying to use logic, okay, because we all try to use logic. So if you said you've reached herd immunity and now you have even more people vaccinated, why are you telling people to wear masks? Why are you saying we still have problems with numbers? Is that not saying your policy has failed?
Yes.
Can you imagine a football team receiving one autogoal, a second autogoal, a third autogoal? They walk off the pitch and they say, we won, we won, we won. What do you mean? You know, your policy is either succeeding or is failing. You have to choose. What is it? And that is the question I would make to the Prime Minister. Has this policy succeeded or not? Because if it succeeded, why are we being forced with new measures? And why are they claiming the science when now we have the Association of Pathologists who are saying the whole issue of forcing masks onto people in the open space does not make scientific sense. So many of us have been saying this for many, many months, not because we are so smart, but because we have seen that many medical experts have been saying this for many, many months. And now the Association of Pathologists in Malta is on board and agreeing. Okay? So who is following the science? And who is working on superstition? Because if we're talking about policies based on science, then we're saying we're not talking about a new religion, a new dogma, but it almost seems like the measures, or maybe the vaccine has become a new religion. Why is it that no one can ask any questions? Because I would like to conclude on some very important points. I'm not going to go into the safety or otherwise of vaccines. That's not for me to say. I'm a lawyer, but what I see is what people's rights are and what rights we have to question. Okay? Because at the end of the day, it's not for anyone to prove that vaccines are not safe. It is for the people producing them and the governments pushing them to prove that they are safe. Not for us to prove that they are not.
Yes.
So, this morning on the radio, on the Italian radio, Rai 2, I heard an advert from the authorities, the health authorities in Italy, saying, do not listen to all this talk against the vaccines. It's all fake news. This was the advert from the health authorities in Italy. It's all fake news. They are safe. Keep taking your vaccines. So my question to the local authorities is, have you done your due diligence on these companies that are producing the vaccines? Because this is quite normal. You have to do due diligence. If you're going to sign a contract with someone, you need to organize, do a background search to see what reputation these people have. Okay? So I would like to share with you for a few seconds an idea of what legal history we have with the vaccine companies that are producing these vaccines. Okay? So I'm not telling you that they're safe or otherwise. I'm telling you, we are being asked to put our faith in certain companies that happen to be the companies with the worst legal history in all of commerce. The worst. More than the oil companies, more than any other companies. Now, maybe someone can say, oh, fake news, fake news. The media doesn't pick up on a lot of things. They say a lot of fake news. So let's stick to very specific facts. Okay? I will give you an indication. Of course, you can all do this research yourselves, and I really hope that the media would pick up on these things because they are very important. That, for example, there was a record payment by GlaxoSmithKline, one of the vaccine companies, of $3 billion. Okay? This was what we call an out-of-court settlement. Why is this important? Because if a judge orders you, okay, declares $1 billion in damages, that's the court's decision. And then that's public documents. You have all the information of the court case, which becomes public. So what do? When they say they're losing a case, they go for an out-of-court settlement. And part of the out-of-court settlement is you are not allowed to divulge any details. So it's like the company is agreeing to pay $3 billion by way of damages. You see? That's why it's called a settlement. They paid $3 billion in 2012. I won't bore you with details, but just to give you an idea, Pfizer, our friends Pfizer, in 2009, they reached an out-of-court settlement of $2.3 billion. Okay? For what? For off-label promotion and kickbacks. Do you know what kickbacks are? Kickbacks are commissions, no? Bribes. This was a criminal offense, and the previous one, the $3 billion, GlaxoSmithKline, $1 billion was criminal fines, and $2 billion were civil. These are very serious. These are the companies who suddenly have now become the saviors of humankind. Huh? There's another company called Johnson & Johnson. They happen to be involved in the COVID vaccines as well. But in 2013, they took the record, because you know these are the lists of the world records, the ones that actually paid the most fines. So there are hundreds of them, but I'm only mentioning the record of each year. 2013, Johnson & Johnson, $2.2 billion. Again, off-label promotion, in other words, telling people, yes, you could use this drug for something else. Yeah? And then it turns out that it was not good at all. And kickbacks again. Okay, false claims. 2012, another company, Abbott Laboratories, $1.5 billion. Eli Lilly, 2009, $1.4 billion, etc., etc. I won't bore you with the details, but if you add these up, from 2004 to 2012, in 9 years, they totted up, these are just the top ones, 20 billion in damages. 20 billion. Divide by 9 years. So that's over 2 billion a year. So we are being asked to put our faith in companies that have been in trouble with the law and have been paying $2 billion a year for their products. Okay, now why is this important? I want to try to conclude here. My penultimate point, actually, I conclude on something actually very important, is that these companies have been losing a lot of money, and some of them have gone bankrupt because of what we call product liability. Now, there is a very stringent level of product liability in all products, your cars, for example, yeah, anything else, safety. with medical drugs. However, there is an exception when it comes to vaccines. Because with the vaccines, many of these companies have obtained exemptions from liability. So these massive fines with all the drugs and other medical procedures and products are not happening in the vaccine industry. That's not to say that people have not been compensated for vaccine injury, because in the United States they've paid over $5 billion to people who have lost their loved ones or who have been seriously damaged by vaccines. But that's the government that's paying, not the companies. Do you know why? Because the governments are signing contracts with these companies to exempt them from liability. Could you imagine that? So these are the ones coming with the worst criminal and civil records, and they are being given product liability. Now, why is this important? Because if our friends in government, in the health authorities, many doctors might tell us, they are safe, they are safe, they are safe. So my next question to these people, if they are so safe, why are you giving the companies with such a bad history product liability exemption? Okay? They need to answer this question. These are legal questions and questions related to accountability. Okay? I'm not telling you they are not safe, but if you are saying they are safe, please, number one, prove it. Number two, why are you exempting them from product liability? But another point, they're actually not exempting them from product liability, because if I, Rudolf Ragonesi, take a vaccine and I am injured, I can find a way to try to sue that company, because the government cannot exempt a company and prevent that company from being sued by me. Who is the government? They come and say, oh no, Rudolf Ragonesi can't sue you. What do you mean? You're the government, you don't represent me. I have my rights, I can sue you. So actually, when we talk about product liability exemption, really what we're talking about is the government is coming in and guaranteeing that in the case that the companies get sued, the government picks up the bill. They're acting as guarantors. They're not actually exempting them. In other words, who's paying the bill? We're paying the bill, the taxpayers, not the companies. You see, this is the problem. But then they're telling us they're safe. So they're telling us they're safe, they're telling us we have to take them, and if anything goes wrong, we use our own taxes to compensate people who are... That's the problem. Another issue. I don't want to be too long because it's a bit cool and people people need to rest their brains and their attention. But keep in mind, this whole thing about product liability, if they are saying that they are safe, what do they mean by safe? Okay, let's say I have a car and the salesman tells me, yes, it's passed the safety test, you're okay, and the brakes work, etc., etc. By saying that the car is safe, example, the brakes work, it doesn't mean, listen, the brakes work most of the time, but after about 100 times or maybe 500 times, the brakes will fail. That's not safe. You can't tell me, no, it's safe most of the time, but after driving the car many times, they might fail. Not fail because you're not servicing them, of course you have to service them. They might just fail. What do you mean? That's not safe? What do you mean by safe? So we've been told, they are safe, they are safe, they are safe. Then we have these lists of these red lights coming up and saying, yes, but people seem to be suffering effect, and there are lots of reports. And then they say, well, the benefits outweigh the risks. That's not safe. So it means maybe 1 out of 100,000, 1 out of 1,000,000, 1 out of 10,000 might be affected. Is that what they were telling people? No. They were telling people they are safe. They're not telling people they are mostly safe, but maybe occasionally there might be a problem. Okay? So I would like to conclude. I'm not going to pass judgment on these reports, but I am going to mention them because, in my opinion, as a lawyer, they are red flags. And I would like to give you a bit of an indication of what is being reported through the media, our friends the media, but very scattered media reports throughout different countries, okay? If you collate all this data in the media reports, you will find that since the beginning of the year, we have over 300 youngsters who are or were athletes who have died following the taking of the vaccines. Let me repeat that number, over 300.
They're saying it's climate change.
Now, before you go running anyone in the media, detractors, and this is all fake news, and this is something I think that is very important for the media to look into, but also for the police and the police commissioner to look into this, and I'll tell you why. Because if there is a connection between the 300 deaths of these youngsters who dropped dead when they were playing basketball, football, whatever it was, okay, that in our term, in our language, we call that a prima facie indication that something is wrong. Okay, we are not saying they died because of the vaccines, but if you have 300 people who are obviously amongst the fittest people on the planet because they are athletes, and 300 of them drop dead in 1 year, then you need to investigate. You cannot keep listening to the same narrative, they are safe, and you do not investigate the 300 athletes. Now, before someone goes off and says this is all rubbish or this is fake news, we have links to all the media coverages and all the names. And I'm not going to bore you with the 300 names, I'm just going to read you a few, just to get an idea, okay? The very first one who died, according to this list, was a person in New York called Miguel Antonio Lugo, age 17, high school football player. He collapsed and died during football practice, okay? Age 17. Maybe it's a coincidence, nothing to do with the vaccine, possibly one case. But why do you have reports, if not to give you indicators? Isn't that what indicators are all about? To give you possible red flags, in order, at least, so that you can investigate. You don't look the other way, you investigate. In Egypt, Abdel Rahman Atef, age 23, club football player, collapsed and died during his team's game in the city of Shakia. There are so many of them, you know, it's so sad. In the USA, Illinois, David Wakefield, we're still talking about the beginning, not very few. 27, New Zealand cricketer, collapsed during training with myocarditis. Brought back to life with defibrillator, hospitalized 3 weeks in intensive care, required extensive rehabilitation before he could walk and talk. And the list goes on and on. Sacramento, California, Emmanuel Antwi, 18, a Kennedy High footballer, Canadian, collapsed on the field in Sacramento. He died. The list goes on and on, 300. Anyone who's interested, we can pass these details. And we are actually going to file a report of this and actually ask the police commissioner to investigate. It's true that these deaths did not happen in Malta, but there is a connection and there is great relevance. Because if there are claims that these injections are safe, and on the other hand, there are indications that 300 athletes in 1 year have died, which is something that has never happened in the history of sport, in the history of the human race, that you had 300 athletes collapsing, then we need to investigate. Because if you investigate and find out that there is a connection, that means that any person, whether it's a public official, a doctor, a member of the media, who comes out and tells you that that particular product is safe, and it turns out that it is not, then we are talking about a case of even criminal liability.
Right, yes.
Because it could be a case of gross negligence,
Yes.
or a case of malfeasance.
Yes.
You cannot try to push and market a product and say that it is safe when it is wrong, when it is wrong, not. Okay? And I would like to conclude on this one point, that a lot of miracles, you know, we're talking about science, we're talking about dogma, but, you know, strangely enough, in this year, a lot of miracles have taken place. And I'll mention you a few. Miraculously, these companies that were almost on the point of bankruptcy, were paying billions, have now become our saviors. Miraculously, they now have contracts where they are exempt. Miraculously, they have governments doing their marketing, they have media doing their marketing, they have media personalities doing their marketing. We know this because some of them have come to us. They said, listen, they have offered to pay us to go on radio and to promote the vaccines, okay? So these vaccine companies are unbelievably lucky because they seem to have everyone doing their own marketing. They have the marketing, they don't need even to sell you their product because they're selling their product to your government. They have no liability because your government pays the bill. And they have all the marketing for free. Never in the history of commerce have we ever seen a case where there have been so many windfall profits by these corporations that have such a dark criminal history, and with the greatest profits the world has ever known in the world of commerce. So I would like to end on this point. I am not telling you the vaccines are not safe, but I am telling you, follow the money, because we're not idiots, we're not naive. We know that there are a lot of commercial interests on this earth, and you need to follow the money, and people need to be accountable. So, to answer the question that was raised earlier, who is accountable at the end of the day? When you ask for information and they give you information from the health department, you get an email without a name. Why? Of course, because no one wants to be accountable. So you get an email from the health department, which is anonymous. Then you go to your doctors and you ask them, can you give me a certificate showing me that the vaccine is safe? They will not give you a written certificate because they don't want to be held accountable for giving you information that they were safe. Then you go to the politicians and you say, will you take responsibility? No. The government will pay, if anything. The government is us, the taxes. So who is responsible at the end of the day? So you knock on the door of the insurance companies. Listen, if I take a vaccine, I have a health insurance. I've been paying health insurance for the last 10 years, 20 years. Will you cover all the expenses? No. Not even the insurance companies. Check it out yourselves. So who's going to pick up the bill at the end of the day? Is it just the people? So the manufacturers are not responsible. The doctors don't want to take responsibility. The insurance companies don't want to take responsibility. The government officials don't want to take responsibility, but they're all telling you that it's safe. Thank you very much.